Some lives unfold in the open, yet remain unseen. A symphony played for no one, a quiet resilience against the relentless tide. What if the most profound moments happen in the shadows, witnessed only by chance? But before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing your thoughts in the comments. The city awoke each day with a roar, a million lives intersecting, colliding, or simply passing by. For Elara Vance, 57, it was a familiar symphony of indifference. Her stage was the corner of elm and maple, a bustling intersection where the scent of exhaust fumes mingled with the distant aroma of freshly baked bread. Her audience was fleeting, hurried commuters, curious tourists, and the occasional child whose eyes would linger on her ancient cello, its varnish dulled by time and countless journeys. Elara's life was a fragile dance on the edge. Her former glory as a classical cellist was a ghost that haunted her, a beautiful melody that had been abruptly silenced by a sudden, cruel twist of fate, a severe hand injury that had stolen the intricate dexterity her craft demanded. Now, her fingers, though still capable of producing notes of surprising purity, ached with the cold and the endless repetition. Her home was a labyrinth of cardboard boxes and the occasional kindly shelter bed. Her meals were often scraps or nothing at all. Yet, even in the teeth of such relentless hardship, Elara carried an internal warmth. It was in the way she gently polished a small, silver locket she wore around her neck, a relic of a past she rarely spoke of. It was in the unyielding dignity with which she held her bow, even when her stomach gnawed at her, and it was in the music itself, which poured from her cello not as a plea for alms, but as an offering of beauty to a world that often refused to see it. Sometimes, when a child would stop, mesmerized by her playing, a faint, almost imperceptible smile would touch her lips. Those moments were her sun, piercing through the perpetual gray of her existence. She was forgotten by most, but not entirely lost. Not yet. The afternoon sun, usually a welcome relief, was a harsh glare bouncing off the glass towers. The usual ebb and flow of the lunch crowd was a torrent, pushing and pulling at the edges of Elara's small world. She was in the middle of a particularly poignant rendition of a Bach cello suite, her eyes closed, lost in the intricate harmonies, when a sudden, high-pitched wail cut through the music. Her eyes fluttered open. A few yards away, near the entrance to a sprawling department store, a small boy, no older than 7, stood frozen, his face contorted in a silent sob, tears streaming down his cheeks. He clutched a bright red balloon, now perilously close to slipping from his tiny grasp. People bustled around him, a blur of legs and briefcases, seemingly oblivious to his distress. Instinct took over. Elara didn't hesitate. She carefully leaned her cello against her stool, her eyes never leaving the boy. Her joints creaked as she pushed herself up, her movements slow but determined. She walked towards him, her usual quiet dignity somehow magnified by the frantic energy around them. She knelt down, her worn coat brushing the gritty pavement. "Hello there," she murmured, her voice soft like the caress of her cello bow. She didn't touch him, didn't try to grab his hand. Instead, she pointed gently to the balloon. "That's a very pretty balloon. Is it a special one?" The boy Leo sniffled, his breath hitching. I lost my mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the city's roar. He looked utterly bewildered, his eyes darting around, searching. Elara's heart ached. She knew that feeling of being lost in a vast, uncaring world. "It's okay," she said, her voice steady. "We'll find her. What does she look like?" She stayed calm, patiently asking about his mother's clothes, trying to get a sense of who she should look for. She made him laugh softly by pretending to chase his balloon when it bobbed away slightly. She didn't call out for attention, didn't make a scene. She simply sat there, quiet anchor in his storm, her presence a shield against the overwhelming city. Across the street, perched high in his sleek, black chaff-eared sedan, Alistair Finch was on a call, his voice a low, commanding rumble into his headset. He was waiting for his driver to navigate the lunchtime traffic. He glanced out the window, absently watching the street. His gaze, usually sharp and analytical, snagged on the unusual tableau. The street musician, who he often vaguely noticed but never truly saw, was kneeling in the middle of the pavement, calmly talking to a distressed child. He watched as she offered a small, crinkled tissue from her pocket, and the boy, still tearful, took it. Alistair felt a faint, unfamiliar tug in his chest. It was a fleeting moment, a tiny crack in the perfectly polished facade of his detachment. He saw the genuine, unforced kindness, the absolute lack of expectation in her posture. Then, his driver pulled away, and the scene vanished from his rearview mirror, leaving only a faint impression. Alistair Finch's world was a fortress of glass and steel, insulated from the gritty reality of the streets below. His days were a relentless cycle of negotiations, market analyses, and high-stakes decisions, each one meticulously calculated for maximum profit. He had built an empire, undeniable in its scale, yet the silence in his sprawling penthouse apartment often felt louder than any boardroom. He rarely thought of anything beyond the next deal, the next acquisition. His life was meticulously curated, devoid of spontaneity, and, he was starting to realize, devoid of warmth. The image of the old woman and the lost boy, however, stubbornly refused to dissipate. It was a faint, persistent echo in the back of his mind, like a forgotten melody. He'd seen countless acts of charity, of course, usually staged for PR or delivered with an air of self-congratulation. But this was different. This was raw, unadorned empathy. She hadn't looked for an audience, hadn't asked for anything. She had simply been there for a frightened child. That evening, staring out at the glittering tapestry of the city, Alistair found himself restless. He opened his laptop, not to a financial report, but to a search engine. He typed in, "Street cello player elm and maple." It was a vague search, almost a foolish one, but something compelled him. He found a few blurry images, a forgotten local news article from years ago about city sounds. Nothing concrete. The next day, instead of his usual direct route, Alistair instructed his driver to take the scenic route, a phrase that surprised even him. He directed the car past elm and maple, slower this time. Elara was there, her cello resting on its spike, her bow poised. He watched her for a full 5 minutes, unseen behind the tinted windows of his car. He noticed the worn patches on her coat, the way she shivered slightly even in the mild morning air. He saw a young woman drop a few coins into her open case, and Elara offer a small, grateful nod. There was no theatricality, just quiet grace. Over the next few days, Alistair found himself making similar detours. He learned her routine, the times she played, the way her music could shift from sorrowful to surprisingly uplifting. He even saw the little boy, Leo, return with his mother, who profusely thanked Elara, trying to press some money into her hand, which Elara gently, but firmly refused. He overheard snippets of conversation, piecing together a mosaic of her humble existence. He saw the glint of the silver locket around her neck. His perfectly constructed worldview began to subtly fracture. He had always believed in self-reliance, in the strict hierarchy of success and failure. But Elara's unwavering kindness in the face of her own profound struggles challenged that. Guilt, a rare and unwelcome guest, began to knock on the doors of his consciousness. What had he done with his vast wealth? Built more towers, acquired more assets. But had he ever truly helped anyone, without an agenda, without a return on investment? The answer, stark and uncomfortable, hung in the air. The old woman's quiet dignity was a mirror, reflecting a hollowness he had long ignored in himself. Alistair was preparing for a major press conference, a grand unveiling of his company's new philanthropic initiative, a gleaming state of the art tech hub for disadvantaged youth. The irony was not lost on him. He was about to announce millions in charitable donations, while a few blocks away, a woman of profound kindness struggled for her next meal. He felt a strange tension building, a dissonance between his public persona and the private shift happening within him. That same morning, Elara was playing a particularly soulful piece, the notes hanging like fragile jewels in the crisp autumn air. Her cello was her only friend, her only comfort. She had managed to scrape together enough for a warm bowl of soup the previous night, and a rare lightness filled her. Suddenly, a brisk, official voice cut through her music. "Excuse me, ma'am." Elara looked up to see Officer Harding, 45, a stern-faced bylaw officer, standing over her. Officer Harding was diligent, by the book, and saw street performers as little more than public nuisances. "You're in violation of City Ordinance 4.17b, Harding stated, holding up a clipboard. "Unpermitted amplified sound in a public space. You've been given multiple warnings." Elara's heart sank. "Officer, I'm not amplified. This is an acoustic cello, and I've been playing here for years, without issue." "Doesn't matter," Harding replied, unyielding. "Several complaints have come in recently about noise disturbance. Your permit expired, and you failed to reapply. You're blocking pedestrian traffic. You need to pack up now, or I'll have to confiscate your instrument and issue a substantial fine." Harding pointed to a small, laminated sign affixed to a nearby lamppost, detailing updated city ordinances that Elara, with no access to the internet or official channels, had no way of knowing had changed. Elara felt a cold dread wash over her. Her cello was her life, her soul. "The fine an insurmountable sum? Please, officer," she pleaded, her voice trembling slightly. "This is how I survive. I don't mean any harm. Rules are rules." "Mum," Harding said, his voice flat, devoid of empathy. He started reaching for her cello case. A small crowd had begun to gather, some watching with pity, others with detached curiosity. It was at this precise moment that Alistair Finch's car, making its scenic route, detour, pulled up to a stoplight just a few yards from the scene. He saw it all: Elara, her face pale with fear, pleading with the unyielding officer, the officer's hand reaching for her precious instrument. His stomach clenched. The cruel irony was a punch to the gut. Here he was, about to be lauded for his grand gestures of philanthropy, while the very system he was a part of, the impersonal machinery of the city, was crushing a genuinely kind soul. The chasm between his world and hers had never felt so vast, so infuriating. He saw the fear in her eyes, the humiliation. This wasn't just about a bylaw, It was about stripping a person of their last shred of dignity, their very means of existence. The quiet shattering in his worldview turned into a moral and emotional climax. He had been a passive observer, but now something had to break. Alistair Finch didn't hesitate. He barked an order to his driver, who, surprised, pulled the car sharply to the curb. Alistair flung open the door, his usual measured calm replaced by a simmering fury. He strode towards the scene, a powerful figure in a bespoke suit, cutting through the small crowd.
"Officer!"
Alistair's voice, usually reserved for boardrooms, boomed with unexpected authority. Officer Harding, startled, turned to face the impeccably dressed man. "What exactly is the nature of this disturbance?" Alistair demanded, his eyes fixed on Elara's trembling hand on her cello. Officer Harding, flustered by the sudden appearance of such an imposing figure, stammered, "Sir, this individual is in violation of city ordinances. Expired permit, noise complaints." "Alice complaints." Alistair scoffed, his gaze sweeping over the handful of onlookers. "I've passed this corner for weeks. Her music is a public service, not a disturbance. And as for permits," he pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. "I believe there's a new arts and culture initiative proposed by the mayor's office, isn't there? Designed to support street artists and bring vibrancy to neglected public spaces. Perhaps, officer, you haven't been briefed." Officer Harding's face blanched. Alistair was known for his vast network and influence, not to mention his recent involvement in city development projects. Harding knew a lost cause when he saw one. He mumbled an apology, retrieved his clipboard, and quickly retreated, muttering something about misunderstanding. The crowd dispersed, leaving only Elara and Alistair. Elara looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and disbelief. She didn't recognize him as the man from the tinted car, only as her sudden, unexpected rescuer. Alistair knelt down, mirroring her earlier gesture to Leo. "Elara," he said, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. "My name is Alistair Finch. I've been watching you play for a while. Your music. It's extraordinary." He paused, taking a breath. "And your kindness. Especially with that young boy the other day. It was profound. It made me see things differently." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a card, not a business card, but one he had hastily scribbled on. "I've been thinking," he continued, a genuine, if unpracticed, smile gracing his lips. "My foundation, the Finch Legacy Foundation, is launching a new program. We're establishing a city-wide initiative to support local artists, providing them with stable venues, resources, and recognition. We need a director. Someone with real soul, real passion, someone who understands the power of art to connect people." He looked her directly in the eyes. "I can think of no one better than you, Elara. It's a proper position, with a salary, benefits, and the opportunity to share your music and help others share theirs on a scale you might not have imagined." Elara was speechless. Tears, hot and unexpected, pricked her eyes. This wasn't charity. This was an offering of purpose, a recognition of her worth beyond the worn-out coat and the cold pavement. This was a chance not just to survive, but to truly live, to share the music that was her very essence. Months later, the Finch Legacy Arts Center opened its doors. Elara Vance, dressed in smart, comfortable clothes, still with her silver locket, stood on a small, brightly lit stage, her cherished cello gleaming under the spotlights. The hall was packed. Alistair Finch, sitting in the front row, watched, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes that no business deal had ever brought him. Elara took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the expectant faces. She saw Leo and his mother in the crowd, waving shyly. She saw Alistair, his face etched with a new kind of peace. She closed her eyes for a moment, and then, with a deep, resonant pull of her bow, the first notes of a soaring, hopeful melody filled the air. It wasn't just music, it was the echo of kindness, a testament to how one unseen act could ignite a quiet explosion of meaning, transforming not just a life, but perhaps a world. The music swelled, a testament that sometimes the most powerful symphonies begin with the smallest, most selfless notes.